Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What are the United Nations and the nations of the world, 193 countries, doing to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, to eliminate poverty, to eliminate hunger, to combat climate change, and many more? My guest today is an expert on both of these institutions and these goals. My guest today is Ambassador Dessima Williams. Her Excellency Dessima Williams is Grenada's former ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Williams currently is the United Nations Special Advisor on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Your Excellency, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you being with me. I can't believe it's been 6 years since we've done an interview. It's been
yes,
way too long.
I was on the other side of the First Avenue. Now I'm on this side.
That's
of
right.
First
You crossed
Avenue.
the street. Okay, right. You represented your country very well. Well, I'm delighted to see you today. Let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals concept, the Development Agenda for 2030. What exactly are we talking about when we say 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets? What, we don't want to go through all 17, but what's the motivation behind these? What's the rationale for these Sustainable Development Goals?
Thank you very much. The Agenda 2030, it's called, is an attempt by all members of the United Nations, 193, to reverse the pattern of development that has led to good successes, but significant challenges. For example, we still have in our world today large pockets of poverty, inequality. We're living in a very unsustainable way, the way we produce with a lot of toxicity in the atmosphere, the way we consume our goods and services with a lot of waste, the fact that we don't observe all the rules and regulations for a healthy planet. So the Agenda 2030 is intended to raise our consciousness about doing things better. And the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them, are intended to be specific milestones that we will aim to achieve over the next 15 years, starting 2015. So it's a broad plan, a broad framework, special goals, and within each goal there are targets to be reached. Some of the targets are for 2020, but most of them are for 2030. So we have 15 years to clean up our act and make a more healthy planet. Exactly. And a more inclusive world without hunger and great waste and poverty and lack of education, to clean that up.
Exactly. Clean up our act is a good way to put it, figuratively and literally.
Yes.
We need to do that because humans have helped destroy the planet to a large degree through climate change and that type of thing. Now, there are 17 goals, as I mentioned, to eliminate poverty, to eliminate hunger, to promote quality education, to combat climate change, to preserve the oceans, the waters, everything under the waters, no matter where it may be. We'll be talking about that in a minute. If I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but these are based on the original Millennium Development Goals that ran from 2000 to 2015, 8 logical, practical, measurable goals to reduce abject poverty by 50%, that type of thing, to reverse the AIDS pandemic. What is the basic difference between these two? Well, the MDGs and the SDGs?
Let me again say that the Agenda 2030, which is the home for the SDGs, also has counterparts. There is a global framework on the environment called the Paris Agreement. There's a global framework on financing, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. There's a global framework on how the world should respond to the poorest countries, called the Istanbul Agreement. And there's a framework for how the world should respond to the challenges and the vulnerability of small island developing states. So if you take all of these agreements and decisions together, they point the way towards a more sustainable future, a future where we will close the gaps of inequality, where we will close the gaps of hunger and poverty. And therefore, the Sustainable Development Goal picks up where the MDGs left off. The MDGs also ran for 15 years. And the difference is that they were very specific and individual goals. There are about 7 of them. and they're related principally and exclusively to the developing countries. The Sustainable Development Goals are, first of all, there are many more, so it's much more comprehensive, more environmental goals, more partnership attention, and so on. So there's 17. They're also applied to all countries in the world, not just the developing or poor countries. And they take on board, in large measure, what the MDGs intended to do and to expand them. And they're integrated. That is, if we attempt to get rid of poverty, the climate change has a role to play, or healthy oceans has a role to play in creating, eradicating poverty. So they go further, they are more comprehensive, and they are more integrated.
Exactly. And our viewers can go to UN.org to take a look at these, or they can just Google Sustainable Development Goals and
yes.
they'll pop up.
But and I brought my little one of the many handbooks that I put out. Each goal has a different symbol. So the first one is no poverty, and here's a family. The next one is zero hunger. Here's a clean bowl of steaming rice or potatoes or pasta. And so on, and we go all the health, education, quality education for all, especially for girls around the world. And it goes right through life below water. It's the oceans, number 14, and each one has a number. So my audience, our audience can look online and become familiar with these, because we have only 13 and a little more years to go to achieve them all.
That's right, and we need to mobilize very quickly and work on these. And
yes.
many gains were made, as you alluded to earlier, under the Millennium Development Goals, and now there are so many of the 169 targets that there's something there for everybody, and there are literally tens of thousands of groups, service clubs like Rotary International, Lions International, faith-based groups,
yes.
religious groups, educational institutions that want to mobilize and work on these, and everybody has a chance to do it because we're all in this game together. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the oceans and clean water, and that leads me to Sustainable Development Goal for, not clean water, but preserving the waters, the oceans, and the water bodies, the bodies of water. But Sustainable Development Goal 14 deals with that. And of course, there's a major conference in June at the United Nations. What exactly is that, the purpose of that conference, and what will come out of it as far as recommendations and a call to action maybe?
Very good. Let me just clarify that there are 2 Sustainable Development Goals on water. The first one is goal number 6. That is water and sanitation. The need for us to preserve water, to make sure that every human being on the planet has access to clean water, and that each of us play our role in that. So that's goal number 6, water and sanitation. Goal number 13, goal number 14 is life underwater, which is the ocean. And 67% of the world, of the planet, is ocean. We find now that we are in a situation where the ocean of the world, it's unhealthy, and it's in serious decline because of our practices over the centuries, dumping, a whole series of measures that have led to a very unhealthy planet. For example, the carbon dioxide, significant percentages of that have gone into the ocean, so it's very hot. Acidification, overfishing, the death of corals in the ocean, and so on. So goal number 14 is intended that we pay attention and do something about reversing the cycle of decline of the health of the oceans. The conference will be held, the conference is June 2017, for a week, and there are 3 major components to this game changer for the oceans conference. The first one is a renewed political commitment. It's a call to action where all the governments will be asked to undertake new commitments to preserve the health of the oceans and to restore it from where it is now to something better. I can tell you that only about 20% of the ocean is currently regulated. So there's a tremendous amount of illegal activities associated with the ocean. The call to action will seek to address that and to highlight that in a political way for reversal. The second outcome of the conference is a series of partnership dialogues and partnership activities that in fact would make sure that we discuss and look for appropriate global level solutions to acidification, illegal fishing, to the removal of plastics in the ocean, the life of the mangroves and coastal areas. Any and everything associated with a healthy ocean will be discussed and organized, and the follow-up should come after the conference is concluded. All of these activities, and I think we now have about over 100 commitments, voluntary commitments, to do something to help the oceans. We intend, and I believe that will scale up to about 1,000 is our basic goal. I'm sure we'll be beyond that soon. And then the third outcome is to celebrate the ocean of the world and to celebrate the life that we have been blessed with. So we will have, for example, World Ocean Day is on June 8th every year all over the world is celebrated. That will happen. And Sailing Festival in New York City, exhibitions, and so on. So it's a conference on life below water is a conference, a call to action on our part. I can tell you, and I'll stop here after this example, there are two sisters from Bali in Indonesia who were appalled by the plastics going into the ocean, and they formed a little NGO between them. It's called Bye Bye Plastics. And they're cleaning up their part of the world by getting rid of the plastics that go into the belly of the fish, the belly of birds, and destroy the animals and put us at risk. So everyone around the world, every single person around the world can do something to reverse the decline. Stop throwing waste into the ocean as a beginning, but there are scores of ways that we can help.
That's right. And these plastic islands, they're literally kilometers and kilometers. They're all pulled together by the currents, and they're killing off many of the fishes, the turtles, birds, that type of thing. And so these young ladies you were talking about are taking hands-on action. You mentioned the opportunity of voluntary commitments, and there's a website, oceanconference.un.org. Our viewers can go to look at this and to commit if they would like and to be involved. But we all need to be involved.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. And as you mentioned, the oceans are so vital, and now we see they're under stress. We see the Great Barrier Reef in Australia is bleaching out, is being destroyed, and that's a great pristine natural resource, but it also it's essential for the life of the fish and the organisms in that particular area of the world. But it's great that you're focusing on this. Now, you're from the island of Grenada in the Caribbean, and we see periodically how hurricanes come up through that area. We saw Fiji was over in the Pacific, was hit about a little over a year ago with Cyclone Winston, I believe, that just devastated many of the islands there. You were involved in the AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States. Is that correct? You were chair for many years. We're going to bring the islands into this because they're in the line of fire, but they also play a critical role. What is the Alliance? That is right, the Alliance of Small Island States, correct?
Yes.
What exactly is it?
Well, the first thing I have to tell you about islands is that the United Nations General Assembly this year is led by a man from the island of Fiji, Peter Thompson, for whom I work. And President Thompson is a tremendous representative of the aspirations and the ambitions of islands. His country, Fiji, was devastated, as you see, by the strongest hurricane to ever hit land in the South Atlantic. And this, unfortunately, is part of the reoccurrence from global warming. The Pacific region is very vulnerable to illegal fishing, to climate hazards, and they are in the front line with other islands for the achievement of the SDGs and for the Ocean Conference in June of 2017. You mentioned that I come from Grenada in the Caribbean. That is true. And we also suffer coral bleaching reduction in the fish stocks, and even just the occasional and unexplained death of fish, large volumes of fish, as a result of the overheating of the ocean. We attribute a lot of that on the basis of scientific evidence to the climate change. And that is also goal number 14 as one of the objectives of the Agenda 2030, to do something strategic and universal to stop climate change. So the islands have been vulnerable because they are small territories, they are surrounded by the ocean, they can be very remote from one island to the other, or from a mainland country to another. And therefore, we have now become a little bit more sensitive. Our existence is more threatened because of the hot environment, and which brings us drought sometimes and floods at another time. But it is also as a result of the decline of the health of the ocean. Our fish stocks, which are part of our livelihoods, whether it's through fishing or tourism or national recreation, all of that is actually now again being threatened in a double manner because of the practice of dumping and generally destroying the ocean. So islands will be in the forefront of the work on the agenda of 2030 to reform and to improve the conditions of the oceans. But all countries, coastal countries that may not be islands, landlocked countries, are called to this work, because you might be a landlocked country, but the toxics and pesticides from agriculture may be draining out into the ocean. You might be landlocked, but you're sending a lot of plastics down your river into the ocean. All of that has to stop. It's one planet, one agenda. And so we want, I think, everybody to understand that if the ocean is in peril, all of us are at peril.
That's very true. We're on this planet together. We have no choice. There's no place to go. There is, as former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, I think, said, there is no planet B. There's no alternative. This is it. Now, on March 20th, the UN, first off, the UN has been a key motivator in focusing attention on climate change, on these issues over the past several years. One other event that took place was back, as we look in the rearview mirror, on March 23rd, the President of the General Assembly, Peter Thompson, as you mentioned, hosted a high-level action event on climate change and the Sustainable Development Agenda. What came out of that conference? And again, our viewers can go to un.org to read about it or see it, but what came out of that as far as recommendations or a call to action or what we can do to improve the situation?
Well, the first thing that came out of it is a demonstration of working together. The United Nations Climate Change Secretariat is in Bonn, Germany. And the Executive Secretary came to the UN, and there was a joint convening to look at what is the relationship between climate change on its own and climate change as defined under the SDGs. So that was a strong collaboration that brought all the main actors together. Secondly, the idea was to see what are the targets that are upcoming by 2020, and there are several of them, to make sure that both units, in Bonn and here in New York, we were on the same page. And I can't tell you now which are the specific outcomes we had, but the idea was that all the targets of 2020 should be highlighted, and we should go at them with a greater intensity. The third and perhaps the most coherent statement was that we cannot achieve sustainable development if we have an unstable world from climate action, from climate change. That we need a healthy and positive climatic environment to stabilize the conditions for sustainable development, whether that be in agriculture, or that be in creating and maintaining shelter and housing, as I said, in food production, even in fisheries, that all of these are disrupted and more expenses necessary for reconstructing them if in fact we don't have a stable environment. And the climate change destabilizes with hurricanes and floods and unpredictable weather patterns. So the idea is that we all around the world have to know that whatever we do in one area has an impact in another area. If we pollute the ocean, it affects our food production, whether it is fish or whether it is the absence of rain for yams or potatoes or whatever it is we're growing, bananas and so on. So that we have an obligation to change our behavior. And that is one of the strong messages of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our patterns of consumption and our patterns of production must change, must be more sustainable, must be more environmentally compatible. So we're not wasting food. We're not destroying the forests, or the rivers, or the mangroves, so that the planet can be stable and take care of us in a healthy and wholesome manner.
Now, as you move forward to implement the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and to get people involved, organizations involved, the private sector involved, the media hopefully will be involved and focus on these, what do you see as your major challenge as you move forward to do this?
You're asking one individual.
Right, an expert.
I don't know about the expert, just one individual. And I've had the great fortune to travel around the world. I've had the great fortune to sit in on scores and scores of meetings with the President of the General Assembly, Peter Thompson. And again, as he would tell you, what we hear is that people don't know about the SDGs. And they're not aware that there is such a framework of activities that, in fact, if properly adhered to, could bring about benefits to humanity. And so I would say that that's the first problem, that people are not aware, sufficiently aware. And in this regard, I'd like to thank you as a member of the media, bringing to the attention of the world the conditions in which we are, poverty, inequality, poor environmental conditions, but that all of them can be reversed if every human being and every organization, government, church, civil society, humanitarian groups, research institutions, if we all put our efforts at reversing in any way we can the unsustainable manner in which we're living. The second thing that is important for the achievement of these goals is finance. Let's take the energy sector or the infrastructure, roads, bridges, even energy. All of that needs to be done in a manner that is long-lasting, that is durable, and that supports the environment. So we can't develop or build concrete infrastructure without paying attention to its impact on the ecosystem. Are we displacing birds? Are we destroying rivers? Are we, destroying the forests and the ability to access, rain or oxygen? What is it? How can we undertake industrial development in a manner that is much more supportive of all life on the planet? So financing that transition is a big need. The cost of building resilient buildings from hurricanes and so on is a big deal. We will need $5-7 trillion a year, the estimates say, to be able to undertake a new energy grid, to move into sustainable energy and renewable energy programs around the world. We would have to find creative ways, both from public sources, which we've had for some time now, and to bring in the private sector financing so that there's a partnership that can help to finance.
That is very, very true. Well, Ambassador Dessima Williams, UN Special Advisor on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, you're absolutely right. And I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program, and wish you the best of luck as we implement the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Miller.
You've been watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately financed, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. Again, we invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to download previous programs. Also, if you would like to share them with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an intra-campus our university has an intra-campus network. Please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided free of charge at no cost. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television. I'm Bill Miller.